Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Way Through. I am your host, Bonnie Worth, where every single week we're having really deep, meaningful conversations about life, our ability to navigate the highs and lows, and how to find our way through some of what are the complexities of our very human condition. Every week, I take a look from through the lens of mediumship, through conscious co-creation, and through ontology, or the metaphysical principles of our very being. And I love that we get to hang out every week, have these conversations, and truly hope that something I've been sharing along the way is really helping to make a positive difference in your life and your path forward as well. And if you're someone who's just tuning in for the very first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm truly honored to have you here, and hope today's conversation is going to really help and support you through the complexities that we experience through loss. Now, loss is an intrinsic part of our human experience. There isn't anyone anywhere that you can talk to that hasn't had some kind of a significant loss in their life, whether that be death, the loss of through the loss of a loved one, in the end of a significant relationship, the loss of a dream, the loss of a career, the loss of even financial security. That loss, irregardless of the conditions around it, is one of the hardest aspects of our human condition to navigate it. Loss is by far the most complicated and most complex emotional experience for us as human beings. When we look at this component that we're of loss that we're talking about, you've heard me speak before about the four core wounds of the ego, and on previous shows I've talked about abandonment and abuse. I've talked about codependency. I've talked about the aspects of these things that we all go through in some way, shape, or form that really affect our very intricate being. And when we look at anything, the abuse, the neglect, when we look at codependency, loss is the fourth of these core wounds that we as human beings, that one, unite us in our suffering, but also unite us in our possibilities as well. And so here again, I'm hoping, something I share here today is going to have to help to enliven or create a spark of possibility for you as you're going through whatever loss you is on the table in your life. Now, when we look at, that this aspect of our human condition, loss isn't just an event that we endure. It's something that is so intertwined with our identity. It leaves us to grapple with all kinds of emotions because we've had something and now we are enduring what is that absence of it, whether that be a person, whether that, as I said, whether that be an understanding of who we've been in the world, or a loss of sense of self with every loss. At any given moment, I mean, we have multiple identities, and these identities are shaped by our experiences, our relationships, our cultural backgrounds, of course, our paradigms and belief systems, which you hear me talk a lot about on the show, and of course, the emotional component to all of it, that the emotion is the energy in motion, and it is what creates, either we are expressing in that in a healthy way, or we are suppressing that emotional energy, which creates a real complexity, which becomes incredibly pronounced in the context of loss. Our grief, around, especially around the loss of a loved one, when someone dies, or when we've had a significant relationship that we lose in our life, we really begin to reevaluate who we are, what really matters to us, how we relate to the world around us. And loss of any kind really leads us to question who we are, what we stand for in the light of our experiences. So, at its core, loss is this deep, deep emotional wound that penetrates deeply. It affects, as I said, the very aggregate beingness of who we are, but it also impacts our sense of identity, that ego, which serves as that cognitive structure that we kind of view the lens of reality through. through. And so their loss is something that is that brings up this myriad of unresolved feelings and emotions that we have to look at trying to navigate in some way. And so feelings, any loss can provoke feelings of anger and sadness, guilt, even denial. We can also experience resentment, regret. There can be even shame associated with the loss as well, which really complicates the whole grieving process. It adds another layer of this massive internal conflict where we question our own self, we question our worthiness, we question our place, of course, in the world or life in general. So these emotions really can trap us into a cycle where we feel really stuck, stagnant. We have an inability to move forward. Now, loss comes with, as I said, all of the emotions, but we look at it in and of itself, it is a journey, that our grief is a journey through. And so we find ourselves replaying memories. We remunerate over what could have been and what might have happened, and if we would have done something differently. We become so fixated on moments that keep us. It's like these poignant reminders of the loss, and it's like there is a gravitational force that keeps putting us into the past, making it more challenging to be present in the future, or even consider or envision the possibility of a future without this person or without this experience, the experiences and connection that we previously had in the face of the loss. So we can get really preoccupied, and we do it unconsciously. This is not saying that this is something we need to stop doing. No, this is an inevitable part of loss. This is what plays out and happens for each and every one of us as a natural aspect of this humanness that is within our whole operating system. And so these memories that come up again, there is the remorse, there is anger. We struggle to create a healthy narrative for ourselves, and we can even become caught up in the victim mentality, or believing that we are defined by the loss, that we maybe even believe that we're not worthy of being happy in our life because of the loss, or simply, especially in and around the consideration of death, we don't feel like our happiness is warranted because the other person is dead. And so we see that their death or their loss creates a suffering for us that really inhibits our own emotional health, our own emotional well-being. And of course, it's we remain very tethered to an identity of who we were, shaped by all the difficulties, shaped by the suffering, rather than, of course, looking at the possibilities. And so this is, when we look at loss, this is definitely not something that is an easy journey. We all have dependent on the relationships that were held, the bond that was experienced in it. Every loss is unique, and so are the complexities of emotions that we deal with around every single loss. So there's not a one path through our loss. There's not a one path through our grief. There is experiences and context and emotions that lead us through that journey. We have sadness for the absence. We have resentment for the pain. There is some times where it feels almost like there is a paralysis of sorts, which makes it really difficult to consider moving forward, because moving forward feels, the very thought of it feels insurmountable. We don't know who we are when someone dies. We don't know who we are anymore when we've experienced any kind of loss. We are not the same person. And that is for a multi reasons, so to speak. So it's not, when we look at it's not just based on, the identity of self, of who we know ourselves to be, but when someone dies, as an example, when they pull or they release from this life and they transition to the other side, they're pulling from us the pieces that we shared with them, the pieces that were overlapping, or we were linked within the energetic framework, the exchange of soul to soul, the spirit to spirit relationship that was there. When they pull and release from the physical world and go into non-physical, they're pulling all the pieces of them from us, and so we're left. That's why it's so painful. That's why it's hurt. That's why we hurt. That's why it's because our fields are literally being torn and pulled at and released with these, what I want to refer to as almost like wounds or gaping holes in our energy field, gaping holes in even what feels like at our very core being, because we don't know who we are without that information in our system. We don't know who we are without that person in our life, because there was a sense of knowing who we were based on the identity with them as a part of the equation of our existence. So it becomes it's very, very complex. And not only do we deal with these with all of the emotions that come up, there are, all of these nuanced understandings of our identity, of who we are, and the energy of what has been the pull or the release of them from our very system, our very energetic framework. And so it loss is very complex and very, very multi-layered. And again, where it feels like it is so insurmountable, we can't imagine a future without that person, because we don't know who we are anymore. And so loss, it puts us into this chance or this opportunity of discovering who we are without the person, who we are without that job, who we are without that dream, who we are without, even in terms of, I mean, just every aspect of identity and understanding of our own place in the world. So it becomes it's a very, loss, or our journey through grief is very contingent on our ability to, one, engage with how we feel, to acknowledge our grief, and in our ability to be able to understand death from a higher perspective, and knowing that everything, when it comes to death, that there we don't cease to exist. And that is the piece of, is death is not the end for us. There is a change of form. We go from being within a physical presence, within a body, of having vocal cords, being able to, have a solid form here on earth. When we die, there is a change of form, that it's no longer the solid form. We go from physical to a non-physical existence, but we, as who we are, don't cease to exist. The soul is an ever expansive, ever continuing, eternal aspect of life, and our spirit is the expression of that life, and that spirit continues to live on. It's the very, very truth in terms of the aspect of being a medium. If you are someone who is sensitive to the non-physical world, then you understand that, there are these individuals who we're still able to connect with, we're still able to engage with, that death is not the end. There is only life in the universe. And so when we look at, it's like we are alive in a physical body, and when we die, we are still very much alive. We just happen to no longer have the physical body to support that basis or support that truth. That being said, when we look at this aspect of our grief and our pain and the challenge of finding out who we are, that is the journey forward, that is the journey through. And the very idea I would say a thing that probably has always irritated me in a deep way is the idea or the adage even that time will heal or time heals all wounds. And even though we might say that or we might hear it being, hear it out there in some way, it is comforting. It's comforting to say, well, in time that I will heal. That's reassuring, and there is some truth in that as well. But I truly don't believe that, time doesn't heal. Time naturally passes. Time continues to move forward. However, we don't it doesn't automatically erase the pain of the loss. So this is, as I said, this is contingent and on our ability to be able to really acknowledge our grief, to feel through all of the layers of emotions and everything that it brings up for us, everything that we are basically positioned to confront in some way, confronting our pain, confronting our resentment, confronting our anger. We have to be willing to, go into the context of all of the emotional energy, because that is an aspect of our being. That isn't, we have emotions as human beings. That's what separates us from any other creature here on earth, is our emotional body. This is the aspect of what makes us so complex and what makes it so challenging for us as human beings to move forward, and from the things that happened in our past, whether those be the stories, the impacting of our wounding and our traumas, or because of the emotional content that is the driving force behind our ability to move forward or not. So the only, we can look at denying, and I know that, I can look back in my own life and times, especially as being a medium, where I denied the impact of the emotions of in regards to the losses that I've had, that I just, believed that I needed to get over it because I knew and understood that there was only life in the universe. I was in connection with the person after moving and transition moving from from the earth plane to the spirit plane. I was, in connection with them. So I saw that they were well. I saw that they were happy. I was having conversations with them in terms of, their repositioning, so to speak, into the non-physical. And so I never allowed myself the privilege of feeling the emotions. And I say it is a privilege to feel emotions. It's actually a real privilege to be human. It's a real privilege to move through these deep processing, of our healing, because of the very fact that not everyone has the chance to do that. That those individuals who have passed, you no longer have the chance to get it right. They no longer have the chance to reconcile. They no longer have the chance to get to know who they are when, here in the physical world. So I see, that everything in terms of this life is such a privilege, and it's so sacred, and it's, this aspect of being human is something that needs to be loved and nurtured, and not looked at as being negative or as an impairment, because being human is, we're not impaired by being human. We are just simply human. And so with that comes, some imperfection in how we navigate and how we move, how whether we can move forward, some imperfection on how we deal with life when it gets really difficult and challenging for us. And that imperfection is everything that is intertwined within the paradigms and within the belief systems that we hold, and that govern our capacity to, be who we are, or to simply understand our spiritual essence, or that higher understanding of self that exists and lives inside of us. So we look at, under having to have compassion for ourselves as we go through all of these emotions, as we go through all of the thoughts, all of these actions, or inaction even following a loss. There's one thing very significant when we look at loss and when we understand grief, that it is possible for us to be able to go to work or go out Christmas shopping, go out and socialize, go out and do things when we're sad. We can still go to a yoga class when we're sad. We can still participate in a meeting at work when we're sad. Sadness, we're still, there's a flow of life to us even when we're sad. We can still do things when we're depressed, even though it feels like an impossible task. There is that resilience inside of us that allows us to be able to move forward even when we're dealing with difficult emotional complexity. That being said, when it comes to grief is a beast all of its own. It's completely different. Sadness says I can still function and go about my life, where grief asks us to stop. It asks us to be present with how we feel, to be in this moment of our suffering, of our despair, and acknowledging the very fact that we don't feel good, or we are not well, that we require this grief says, be here now and have compassion, be here now and honor yourself for what you are feeling and experiencing. Be here in this right now, as the pieces of you the are looking to be healed. The deeper understanding of self needs to be recognized, and we can go through a very dark time when we're going through our grief journey. And we are in absolute separation when we are grieving. We are in absolute separation from who we truly are. That's why it hurts so much. Those pieces of us are missing. And so we're completely separated from who we are. And so our journey through grief, as I said, grief asks us to stop, drop. It asks us to weep. It asks us to be in our sorrow. It asks us to be here right now, to be here and acknowledge and really lean into it, lean into our pain. And of course, as human beings, it's generally and very often sometimes the last thing that we want to do. And or there are so many mixed messages in our society that tell us that we need to get over it already, that we need to, get back into life. And there's some truth about getting back into living again after a loss, but it's not an overnight process. And depending on the relationship that was held, depending on the circumstances that came up to the loss itself, whether there be trauma associated with the loss, whether that be trauma that had been experienced in that relationship prior to the death, if there was, trauma around the experience, the 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 state of or the experiences of the loss, anything around that. And again, I'm talking any kind of loss, not just the loss of life, but the loss of a career, the loss of financial security. All of these things, that is a part that we can't just get over. That in the impact of the loss, the information or the narrative behind what was holding, what was holding true in that relationship, or holding true within the context of the experience, needs to be processed. It needs to be understood, but not understood from an intellectual point of view. It needs to be understood from a much deeper space inside of us, to understand that operating system, the things that we believed or understood, or how we understood ourselves to be or the identity of self needs to be understood. It needs to be realized before it can ever be possible for us to look at making steps forward from the loss. Now, there is, just as I said, that time heals all wounds. And, where have people say you just need to get over it already, or especially in the experiences where there's been a loss of a loved one, it's like, that was 5 years ago already, or it's time to get over it. That's been 20 years, or it's been 3 months since that person has died. There's all of this pressure that's put on us, and pressure, mind you, pressure that comes from a good place. People say these things because they care. They say these things because they want to help in some way, and yet that it's not very helpful in when we understand the complexity of what's going on, that the our ability to be able to understand who we are and to process the pain of this. And we need time to process the pain. Time does not heal. Time goes forward, but our healing, as I said, is contingent on our ability to really lean into our pain, to confront the pain, and to give ourselves the space to be in all of the all of the complexity and all of the suffering and of the loss before we can begin to understand who we are. We've got to clean the filter. We've got to clear through all of those barriers that that grief has created around us. We confront ourselves, and we confront what's going on inside of us, or what is going on inside of us is what is required of us to confront. And that's not always easy. And so, therefore, we can't just get over it. But here again, I want to say we never get over our losses, that those losses are always there, that our grief is always there. It's not something that we get over. This transformation from being, and from a point of grieving to finding a way back to happiness, or finding some peace after death, that doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual awakening to it. It's a gradual journey through it. And so this isn't something we just get over. But when I say that there is a gradual awakening, this is the key, and understanding that through activities or practices that bring us moments, a moment of ease, a moment of joy, a moment of relief from how we've been feeling, or what we were experiencing prior, that those moments are little nuggets, so to speak, that help us to raise our vibration, to raise or have what is an elevation of energy that helps us um, you know, to help us to feel a little bit better, just to feel a little bit better. These little things that help us to recalibrate our emotional state, that allows us to find a flicker of light within the shadow of loss. And so we never get over our losses. They always are there. The pain is always there. The grief associated with the loss can always be there. The thing is that then, through small small things that can serve as essential tools, that as we recalibrate our emotional state, we raise in vibration. We start to and as we raise in vibration, is to understand we actually rise above our losses. So the loss always sits there. And that's why grief, can be these waves that can show up, even, 10 years that can go by, or 15 or 30 years can go by. And the anniversary of the experience or the anniversary of the death of our loved one, can show up where all of a sudden we are reflecting, we are caught in maybe even deep emotion and we find ourselves crying. We are purging, we are processing another layer of grief. So grief, there's multi layers to it, and we always come back into it when we are in a space where even unconsciously where we're able to process another layer of that grief. And so there are, fluctuations with on a journey through grief. There are fluctuations on the in our energy state as we move through and process the losses around us. And so that's because when we look at we that this is all energy, that we never get over these loss, but there is a layer that we begin to rise above them in vibrationally, we begin to raise in frequency, and we begin to integrate the loss in our lives. We integrate this loss, which allows our identity to evolve, which now allows us to understand not only are we, who we are at a deeper level, but we begin to understand life without the person or without that dream, life without that job or that career. So this is, there's so many pieces to our ability to go through or move forward through our losses. It's so multifaceted. There is a web of emotion that sits there. There is the complexity of our own personal identity, and then it is also the energetic state that can either lead us forward or what brings us deeper into the pain or into the emotion of our loss. So loss is not something we get over. We don't just move forward from loss. If we do move forward, we can be, as I said earlier, in that state of denial where we are in suppression of the pain. We're in suppression. It's like, I just need to suck it up. I need to get over it. I need to get back to work. I need to, we do things. And I'm not saying, that that's wrong either, because for some people, in how they process pain is an important thing to understand as well. For some people, it's important for us to sit in and be in quiet and solitude, and beginning to give ourselves a chance to reflect and be in the experience. For others, that having a distraction gives some reprieve. A distraction allows for consideration of life, of moving forward, but it becomes ensuring that our distractions aren't the coping mechanisms in order for us to deny the very things that are sitting within our heart that need to be addressed, or this chance that we've been given to understand and know ourselves at a much deeper level, a chance to find a power that lies within us, a chance to move through and lean into the pain and cultivate the authentic resilience to move forward. Now, again, if you're tuning in for the first time ever, I really encourage you to go back and listen to the episode that I shared on authentic resilience, our ability to lean into the pain, to feel the things we need to feel, to address and to have compassion and self-love, and find this chance to be able to alter and shift the very paradigms and belief systems that have been holding us or trapping us to believe that we are anything less than worthy of healing, or anything less than worthy of knowing peace or joy or wellness in our lives. That we have, yes, this human capacity to have resilience when the going gets tough. The tough get going. I'm sure you've heard that as well. That is the resilience, that innate, that natural resilience that we have. But it's not a resilience that serves us. It's a resilience that momentarily or temporarily serves us through challenging and difficult situations. But in order to have long term and inner and cultivate an inner strength that's beyond is really to look at what authentic resilience is all about, and that can only be, through our ability to confront how we feel, to alter and shift the very makeup of our being in order to move forward. So we look at, and going back here, when we look at cultivating authentic resilience, what we also need to understand that identity evolves. And so authentic resilience supports the ever evolving identity that we have of self. We're never the same person after loss. And how could we be, considering everything that we've gone through, how we look at life, what our priorities are? We understand ourselves at a deeper level. We know now how it is we want to live our lives differently. We understand mortality, or maybe even, in facing our own mortality when loss happens. And so we begin to look at we can't be the same person. We don't have person in physical presence with us, or that job as something we're doing every day, or and so we look at those are missing pieces. And so there all those pieces have fallen away, so that we can new pieces of understanding, new information, new awareness begins to awaken inside of us. And so therefore we're not the same person. We're not. We can look even in consideration of our physical body, and how our physical body reproduces the cells and reproduces, our organs, in 1 year. What happens? We're not even the same person biologically in a year. How could we even consider that we would be the same person after we've had a loss? In fact, I believe that's a really unhealthy expectation that we have of others when they've been going through a loss, when they've are grieving, that we are expecting them to be who they were before, and it's not possible. It's not possible. And I invite you to let them show you who they are now, after the loss, after they've transformed this pain, after they've been able to cultivate more, I would say cultivate greater ease and understanding of who they are. We want to give people a chance to show us, and our role is to love and accept them for who they are now, not who they used to be prior to the loss. And that is essential, even when we consider that for ourselves. This is about loving and accepting who we are now after the loss, and not trying to hang on to who we used to be prior to it. And again, definitely not an easy thing to do. And our journey through loss is a very personal journey. There's so many layers to this, that it's not possible for us to simply get over it. It's not possible to go, from being in in a certain kind of relationship with life, not just a relationship with a person, but a certain relationship with life, and have that all to be altered, shifted, and changed, and to think that we would be the same. In fact, we don't ever want to be the same. I truly believe that we are here to evolve. We are here to move beyond who we've conceptualized, who we've believed ourselves to be, based on the paradigms, the belief systems, everything that we've inherited and taken on. And so when we experience a loss, what we've inherited is what we confront. What we've inherited is what we need to take a deep dive and take a look at, because we are so much more than how we've been led to believe. There's so much more possible than maybe what we've ever considered. There is so much more for us to be living and experiencing in our life. And when these bad things happen and we experience a loss in essence, a loss is one of the greatest gifts that we could ever be given, because it is this chance, this opportunity to redefine who we are, to consider what else is possible for our lives, and to begin to look at not only healing the things that have created barriers and impairments to our well-being, but we are positioned to make some new optimal choices for our lives and go getting through any loss. It is all about choice, the choice to get up, the choice to put one foot in front of the other, the choice to be able to say yes to life in small little ways is an act of absolute, not just surrender, but an act of absolute acknowledgement of of the being of who we are, of this one that lives inside of us, that is able to rise up when we feel at our weakest. And that one that rises up is the very one that helps us to rise above our losses, to increase our capacity to be able to move into a place of life and living and being from from this authentic resilient state that empowers us to move forward. But we need to, as I said, we need to find solace. We need to find solace. We need to find compassion. We need to acknowledge the pain, and then we begin to make small little choices that help us in some way, that nurture us in some way. And of course, beginning to look, and explore other avenues, explore other ways of living life, even maybe even from a spiritual context or connections, even social connections. These are all ways that we look at how our vibration begins to raise from this one that exists inside of us that can empower us to move forward. And when we understand, this higher self, this one that can help us take that step forward and to get out of bed and to get dressed and to get out go for a walk, that one that exists inside of us is the one that is going to help to raise our vibration. And that's going to be the help us to really transcend our losses. So here, when we look at the landscape of loss, it is, as I said, undoubtedly the hardest things we ever have to go forward. It is a core wound that requires nurturement, compassion, care. And there's so many valleys here. There's so many, we drop in and out of our loss. We drop in and out of our grief. And that happens over our life. And so it just becomes this ability to no longer be ensnared by the emotions, but instead find solace in the belief that we are loved, and find solace in the belief that our loved ones, death is not final. And find solace in the belief that we have a capacity to move, not only a capacity to move through our losses, but we have a capacity to raise our vibration and experience life in a new way, and a way that is more aligned, that is more authentic, a life that we are maybe more worthy of. Loss creates pathways for transformation. And as we honor our losses and we honor ourselves for what we are enduring, we can step forward into the future, even when the future seems very unknown. But as we come to know ourselves more, the future becomes more and more clear as a result. All right, sweet friends. Well, again, I can talk for so many of the directions in terms of understanding losses, and I just want to share that whatever you're going through, whatever it is that is on your heart, and the challenge of what you're looking to reconcile inside of you in terms of your own personal losses, my prayer for you is that you do find peace and ease on this journey, that you are able to to nurture and care for yourself, and to know ultimately that you are so loved and so worthy. And wherever, and whatever you're experiencing, that this is temporary, and that you do have it within you to move forward, and there is purpose for you in this life. And so I hope that you will come to know that, and especially as the holiday seasons as approaching, and we are faced, with memories, and we are faced with the absence of those who we hold dear. Trust and know that they're with you, that they're celebrating, and that they are part of all of this with you. That never changes. They never cease to exist, because our love for them and their love for us never ceases to exist either. All right, God bless everyone. Have a great week ahead, and remember, irregardless of the challenges that are happening, there is indeed always a way through.